Boo! Did I scare you? For as long as I can remember, I've always had an immense interest and passion for video games. Doom 3 VR, anyone? For as long as the video game industry has existed, there has been competition with game companies trying to grab your attention with things such as box arts, price tags, labels, and more. Oh, the artist behind this Mega Man game put a lot of effort into this illustration. That's how you know it's gotta be good.
How are you even supposed to dodge that?
The idea of re-releasing classic games goes back as far as the days of the Atari 2600 actually, but around the time of the 4th generation, with the market being far less saturated and instead centered around only a couple of big companies such as Nintendo and Sega, the push became much more apparent. Consumers gotta know we have good games, so we should take our biggest hits and best sellers and reprint them with lower MSRPs. And as history progresses, we should make some of them real eyesores. You know, one of my favorite consoles of all time has always been the Nintendo GameCube. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved lunchboxes, and video games were a close 10th. Looking at my collection on my shelf makes me want to kill someone! When you want to amass a large game library, you're bound to collect some of the greatest hits on that console. I mean, what's a PS2 collection without Shadow the Hedgehog, am I right? Since the aforementioned reprints of popular games are sold at lower retail prices, a lot of the time they're the most common version of that game you can find out in the wild. And to make them eye-grabbing to consumers, they had to commit such mortal sins like making the GameCube's spine yellow. These re-releases make having a wall of games with consistent spines nearly impossible. You can always find the original prints, but the reprints tend to be cheaper because they're deemed less valuable to collectors a lot of the time. I feel like determining something's value based on a simple color is something I learned in history one time, but my memory is fuzzy, I don't know. As a collector, these have always been fun topics to talk about, and I felt like an interesting way to talk about them would be to create a tier list ranking all of them from worst to best. Only the North American ones though, because if I published my thoughts on what the Europeans created, I would probably get terminated from YouTube. The ranking will consider many things, such as how pleasant it is to look at, whether or not it'll affect AutoZone, and the spine, which is a thing most collectors, including myself, like to fuss about. Now we got PlayStation, Nintendo, Sega, and Xbox stuff to talk about. Let's get started. Starting with possibly the worst one I've ever seen at number 21, the Game Boy's Player's Choice. Not only is this color sorta meh, but it's so hard to read. How do you even mess that up? From afar, you probably wouldn't even be able to make out the word Game Boy. It just looks like caramel diarrhea. Now, to be fair, the Game Boy had cardboard boxes most people threw away, but judging it based on its design, it's very poor and unappealing if you ask me. I've never been much of a classic Game Boy guy myself, let alone a collector, so I don't care that much, but this does look pretty darn bad, frankly, and worse than all the other upcoming ones. Next up at number 20, we have the infamous GameCube's Player's Choice. I don't know which player chose this, but they must have been crazy. It doesn't look that bad on the front cover, tucked into the top. I kind of like it actually, but trigger warning, the spine is horrid. I genuinely cannot think of another color that would contrast the GameCube's black end label as bad as this bright yellow does. The absolute antithesis of consistency right here. I hate looking at my GameCube collection just to see these. If I was legally blind, then I'm pretty sure I'd still be able to make out the yellow labels in my collection. This is one of the few consoles I try to actively avoid finding reprints unless it's just a crazy deal or something. And why the heck do all of my Sonic games have to be Player's Choice?
Hey, you keep talking and I'll kick your ass.
Did Sonic Heroes just talk?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought I was going crazy or something. Now, for number 19. The PlayStation 2 has a very simple and clean box art format. Just like the console itself, it's pretty great. But its greatest hits are super weird. I don't actually hate this one, but it's so strange, like this choice of this weird red, orange, or burgundy perhaps? And the end label is curved for like no good reason, and really the way the text's color and the PS logo's backgrounds are inverted just aren't that pleasant. I'll only buy these if I have to. Not the worst ever, just so strange it gets knocked down a lot. For number 18, let me tell you, if you're looking for a consistent collection of spines, and avoid collecting PS3 games like the plague, despite the console itself having an awesome library of classics. The system came out in 2006 with this Spider-Man font and teeny tiny end labels on the spine. Then in 2009 they redesigned it to be more modern and fit with the PS2's boxes. And then for the greatest hits they changed the color of the label and spine from gray to bright red, which is quite a contrast. The red is definitely more pleasing than the PS2's choice of color, but I never liked how much they stick out in my collection. Sure, the PS3 spines have a lot of variety, but red cases against gray still stick out a lot, and it's one of the more infamous ones out there, I believe. Another one where I kind of like to avoid grabbing it if possible. Here at number 17, we don't have anything special, really. The PSP's greatest hits lineup was pretty run-of-the-mill compared to the rest of PlayStation's sins against humanity.
Hell?
I will say I'm not very well versed with the system and don't really have a collection, however I still have to talk about this one. The red really isn't that bad, but not great either. And it seems they didn't have the balls to change the cases like PS3. I respect this lineup of reprints on this console I never cared for, although it's far from my favorite design. Number 16. I actually never knew Xbox One had a greatest hits lineup for the longest time, and you know I really wasn't missing out on much. Sure, it's pretty harmless, but it's just so uninspired, almost like the console itself. There's no personality to this greatest hits label, and I don't like how its spot constantly changes depending on the box art itself. While it is considered of the artwork, it just feels so tacked on and boring. It doesn't ruin the spine like a few I've looked at already, but it's as boring as the Xbox One itself. And don't even get me started on the backwards compatible Xbox 360 game conundrum. In the number 15 spot, we have a similar situation to the GameCube with the PS1's greatest hits lineup. Now I will give it some compliments. I've grown to really like the lime color for some reason. Contrary to this little nab in my Metroid Prime video, this one killed my family. It only injured them, not killed them. It's not incredibly bright, and overall a really pleasant color to look at. But when considering how it fits into a PS1 collection, it's pretty bad again. I don't have much of a PS1 collection going, but I do like the console and its library quite a bit, as anyone should. Unfortunately, it's just that a lot of my favorite games just so happen to be pretty pricey. Symphony of the Night? Klonoa? Parappa? Wait, how did I even get this? The only aspects making this one beat out the others are the better color choice and the fact these cases are pretty tiny and not 6'5" like the GameCube, so it almost feels like it has less impact. You know, this ranking is starting to make me realize something. A lot of these reprints aren't too great. They're just so different, and I hate seeing them in my collection. They're a different color. They just ruin everything. That gives me an idea.
A few moments later.
Alright guys, starting today, I'm going to be segregating my game collection. It looks so much better now. No more red and green and yellow labels ruining everything. That's where you belong, Sonic Heroes. Also made sure to include my not for resale copy of Sonic 2 up here because whoever resold me this broke the law and I don't support criminals. Anyways, I'm gonna go run Mario 64 on widescreen on my computer and talk about Xbox 360 games. Surprisingly, the PS3 wasn't even the 7th gen console with the most inconsistency. That's the Xbox 360. I'm not a Kingdom Hearts guy, but I gotta say the default cases for this system are very simple and clean. I like them a lot. Then they started off with Platinum Hits, similar to the OG Xbox's design, but not as clean in my opinion. Then there's the Platinum Family Hits for those good old E-rated games. Then they eventually revamped the Platinum Hits title to only be at the top, but they for some baffling reason made the end label like twice as long compared to the usual ones, which looks horrid. I hate this. Then they fused this border pattern with the modern look of the new Platinum Hits to create this, which is just an incredibly strange process, although I actually like it. And on top of that, there's Connect games that have purple cases, which isn't bad all things considered, but the inconsistency here is insane. This is actually where the number 360 comes from. There's 360 different box art formats for this console. They're all close together on my list, so I would rank them as follows. The OG Platinum Hits being the worst at number 14 since the design just isn't that cool to me. The light gray Platinum Hits being in the middle at 13 because it looks pretty clean on the front with an ugly spine. And the dark gray Platinum Hits at number 14 because despite having a pretty bad spine as well, it does have a bit more edge to it, you know? Overall, I just really enjoy the format the Xbox 360 would sometimes follow, which is why it may seem oddly high to some despite its severe case of spine dysmorphia. Now, number 11. The Sega Genesis is a pretty neat console, having classics such as Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and 875 other games no one cares about, obviously, but it always had a bit of a weird take on the greatest hits with its Sega Classic lineup. It takes the box art and shrinks it with this border surrounding it along with the text Sega Classic. Fortunately, the Sega Genesis has always had lots of different kinds of cases and spines, so it doesn't feel too out of place. But I'm still not a massive fan of the design overall, maybe a bit uninspired, but at the very least I can appreciate how it doesn't burn my eyes. But the Sega Genesis also had the Mega Hits series launching in 1997 and consisted of only 10 games, which is the same number I just so happen to rank it on my list. These are super colorful. You got the red label with a yellow edge to it, as well as a mega value label in the corner, which is a bit odd, but I don't know, there's something uniquely charming about this one. To me, it just looks like it's full of 90s edge, and honestly a great fit for such acclaimed classics like Taz and Escape from Mars. I like it when they have at least some personality indicative of the console, you know? Maybe the Game Boy's fugly player's choice was meant to represent how bad the screen looks. Now, at the number 9 spot, the original Xbox is a system I've never had much experience with, but I've always really enjoyed how its boxes look. The label up top and the green cases give it a nice edge. It almost makes me want to start collecting despite having two fully functional 6th gen consoles I actively collect for. Their Platinum Hits re-releases add a slick silver border that engulfs the spine, as well as the end label being white rather than black. This sounds terrible, but I still think it looks pretty clean. And like a lot of other systems, the spines have enough diversity to not make it off-putting. This one is pretty subjective, but I don't care, it's my list. Go make your own, idiot. Number 8. The Dreamcast itself, despite despite having what is quite possibly my favorite game ever, is also notorious for winning lots of Brandt doesn't care that much about you awards, but I actually happen to enjoy its approach to classic reprints. Here we have Sega All-Stars. The orange is very pleasing on the eyes, and I like how it's tucked into the side of the CD case, just like the PS1 does it. Sure, the entire spine ends up being orange instead of the usual white, but the cases are very tiny, and orange and white are the Dreamcast staple color scheme, so I actually think it works rather well. I don't know where the PS1 got bright lime from, maybe the triangle button, I don't know. Alright, I have officially finished my 200th playthrough of Parappa the Rapper 2. I guess it's time to find something else to play now. Oh, I know! I should play Rayman Legends! I've been meaning to get to this game one day, as well as lots of other Rayman titles in my backlog. Huh, that's weird. I can't seem to find it in the R section anywhere. Oh, I forgot I segregated my game collection. You know, it almost seems inconvenient doing this for the sake of consistency, but it's worth it. I swear. And now for lucky number 7, we have quite the unlucky console. I do have a bit of nostalgia for the Wii U and enjoy its library decent enough, but we all know why it failed, come on. Grandma didn't even have the balls to call this one a Nintendo, it was a freak of nature. The Wii U is one of many to feature Nintendo's creatively titled Nintendo Selects design. A nice ribbon with the Nintendo Selects title and this red gradient border. It's actually very good in my opinion, however this is the weakest of the Nintendo Selects, since compared to the others, the ribbon looks more tacked on and doesn't go as well with the Wii U's ridge up top. It just wants to be the GameCube so bad, but it forgot to be a good console. Also, hallelujah, it doesn't even affect the spine, isn't that amazing? While it may be the weakest of its lineup series, the Wii U had a pretty good approach on how to do things. I don't know why Mario Kart 8's case is red though. Next up at 6th place, we have the exact same Nintendo Selects design but on the 3DS. What can I say, I just think it suits the 3DS format better despite being cut off by the label which just screams lazy, but I haven't lost any sleep over it. I swear. Once again, it doesn't plague the spine in any way at all, which is very nice. Also, I like how Luigi sticks out of the border on Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. The title Nintendo is attempting to erase from history. At number 5, we have the N64's Player's Choice. I really like the N64's box art formula. It's very colorful and playful, and I really enjoy it even though I don't have the collection going because 1, the games were cartridges in disposable cardboard boxes, 2, no end labels, and 3, I already have Lego racers, so I'm set for life, let's be honest. Now sure, this choice of color isn't as bright as the red, but I like how it makes them stand out while not being an eyesore. It almost looks professional in a way, and I love the Player's Choice logo. This one just has a charm that ranks oddly high for me. Okay, maybe Lego Racers isn't that great. Now I'm in the mood for a real all-time classic like Sonic Adventure 2. It's kind of annoying going so out of my way to grab all these games. I mean, they're just a different color, who cares? Maybe they're not that bad, who knows? Here we have one of my favorite consoles of all time at number 4, the PS4. It may not be as nostalgic as the good old Wii or GameCube for me, but it was my primary console for so many years, so it's easily the one I have the most memories with. So many of my favorite games of all time that shaped me into who I am today are playable on this sucker. And this console actually knew how to do greatest hits right. Sure, it does change the case to red, but a red case actually fits in very well with a blue case since they're very bright and colorful. The spine also features a red gradient background with the game logo in white, but the PS4's spines are so diverse you hardly notice it. I mean, look at how many non-PS hits games I have with red spines. Sure, I'll never understand why the logo is on the digital game itself on the console, but that doesn't stop this one from being miles above every other form of greatest hits PlayStation has ever done. I don't think that's a hot take though. At number 3, we have the Game Boy Advance's Player's Choice. Isn't it crazy how this design uses the exact same label as the GameCube's Player's Choice, which is the second worst on this whole list? This is because it doesn't affect the spine of the box at all, which removes the core problem with the design of that underperforming lunchbox's cases. To be fair, spines didn't have much emphasis of the Game Boy Advance since they were cardboard boxes typically disposed of, but removing this fatal flaw reveals how the design is actually pretty sleek. I don't really collect for GBA, but I really love this system. It just happens to have a super good library with, dare I say, an advanced take on Player's Choice. There's so much weird stuff going on with the Super Nintendo's box art, but I honestly love it, which is why it's at number 2. You got these 16 dots to symbolize the 16-bit power, but they stopped spacing them out evenly, so just cram them into the corner, which, why did they do this? You got this purple geometry for like no reason, the colorful only for Nintendo ridge, the Famicom logo of the 4 buttons seldom used to represent the console in the West, the occasional tagline slightly obscuring the art, and that nice Nintendo seal. All of this is so questionable, but I just love it. The random patterns and colors sort of remind me of those wacky carpets you find at the arcades. It just screams retro for lack of a better term. For their Player's Choice games, it has this fancy ribbon which happens to have a color I love for some reason that also changes the Super Nintendo logo. This one just feels so royal, like it's not in your face, but at the same time it feels like it's saying, Greetings, this is one of the greatest games on this system, look at me. And everything about it is just so fun in my opinion. And here we have it, the greatest reprint design of all time, the Wii's Nintendo Selects. Its overall approach is just perfect in my opinion. The red carpet-esque border with the Nintendo Selects ribbon just makes it feel grand. Not to mention the placement of said ribbon complements the design of the box art much more than the Wii U or 3DS's take on it in my opinion. Not only all that, but it has no bearing on the spine, and overall this formula is easily the best way to do it in my eyes. It's noticeable to consumers, it doesn't scream for attention by committing heinous crimes like becoming yellow. And really, at the end of the day, the lower price should be enough to grab consumers' attention, so this design is how you do it.
You know, maybe you're not that bad, Sonic Heroes.
Oddly enough, this trend actually seems to be dying out in the industry. The Nintendo Switch, which is on its way out soon I believe, never got Nintendo Selects. The PS5 hasn't gotten any variant of Greatest Hits yet, and neither has the Xbox Series Fart or whatever it's called. Who cares about that console? Perhaps there are a couple of reasons, like the rise of digital storefronts in gaming, or companies realizing as long as we just lower the price, people will notice so we don't gotta scream bloody yellow. Player's Choice, Greatest Hits, Platinum Hits, whatever you want to call it, has a very interesting legacy. It's shown how companies provide lots of unique takes to advertise their hit games to consumers and how they can also out-stupid each other in a lot of cases. While they definitely won't be missed, there's something interesting to look back on and think about how much better your GameCube collection could look in a perfect world.
You know, making this list has taught me a very valuable lesson that, at the end of the day, these are still just games and we shouldn't judge them based on their color or appearance or any cosmetic differences, but rather what they are on the inside, because that's truly what matters. So, likewise, Sonic Heroes is still pretty dumb.